So after the last video I did about live webinars, I had quite a few people reaching out asking for more tactical, nitty-gritty, plug-and-play stuff that they can use for their webinars. And after collecting well over $15 million in cash collected for our clients just from live webinars and running hundreds of live webinars, I have a lot of stuff to share. So that's exactly what this video is going to be. And I'm not going to lie, the first couple of years that I was in this whole info product game, I don't think I would have given this stuff away for free. But what I've realized now is that no matter how much you give away for free, there's always going to be a select few people who just want extra help with it, which makes it worthwhile for me. So if that's you and you want us to either consult on your webinars or just completely do them for you, click the link down below and just apply to work with us. But if you're not ready for that just yet, let's get right into the video. So as promised, I wanted to do a little more in-depth webinar video. So the first video was a bit of an overview as to how webinars work, exactly who they're meant for, and kind of the overview of how things work. But on this video, I'm gonna get a little more granular because like I said in the first video, we've done well over $15 million in cash collected on our live webinars. So in today's video, I'm just gonna give you all the secrets. So here's the truth. Running one big webinar or one big launch really doesn't mean anything. And the only reason why I think you should be listening to me is because we've done this quite literally hundreds of times across all different niches, people with all different audience sizes, all different types of offers, etc. So here, obviously I blurred everything just for respect for the client, but this is our biggest webinar ever. And we did a little under $800,000 in cash collected on one webinar. So I just wanted to show you guys that, just get your attention, but let's get right into how we actually made that happen. So first off, just like anything else, you need to understand what success even looks like. So I'm gonna spend a minute here, even though it's a little boring, just because I want you guys to understand what success really looks like with a webinar funnel. And one thing to mention here is that there's a lot of steps, which for you as the operator or the offer owner means that there's a lot of drop off happening within each of these steps. So if you really wanna make webinars work, you have to pay close attention to exactly the flow of how all of this works so you can understand how to minimize these little leaks here. So I'm gonna give this example as if you're running paid ads to your webinars. Obviously, if you're just doing organic, maybe pay attention from here down. But when it comes to CPMs, I'm just giving you guys very realistic kind of ballpark numbers here so you can understand kind of where things need to be at a baseline level. And obviously, the better you can get your numbers, the more profitable you're going to be. So first, we can just put average CPMs at $30, aggregate click-through rate. Any good ad should be above a 1% click-through rate. Sign up rate on the page, let's say it's 30%, and that would leave your cost per registrant being right around $10. I try to make this just so it's even and simple numbers. So let's say off of that, you have a 40% show rate to the webinar. So that puts you at $25 per live attendee. And then let's say after that, 80% of people stay to the end of the webinar. So that puts you around $31 for every person you pitch to. Off of that, you book 15% of the people you pitch to live on the webinar. This is obviously the example of you pitching a call rather than a sale. So at that point, you're paying $208 per call that you're booking on the webinar. After follow-up processes, let's say you get that back up to 20%. So that puts you at $156 per call booked. And then let's say you cancel 20% of the calls because they're unqualified. So that puts you at around $200 per qualified call. Your show rate should be around 60%, slightly higher just because of the webinar. So let's say that puts you at $325 per live call. And then let's say your close rate is around to 35%. So that would put you right under $1,000 per closed deal. And if your average cash per close is around $4,000, that would put you at a 4-to-1 ROAS. So obviously these are very respectable numbers, especially just on a 7-day period, because if you can manage to get up to a 4-to-1 ROAS just on the week of the webinar, if you do like a 30 or 60-day look back window and you essentially look at all the people who came through those ads 30 or 60 days later, you're probably gonna be closer to like a 5 or 6-to-1 ROAS, which is obviously a little bit more what we're going for. So now that we've defined what success kind of looks like, and guys, all these numbers I would say are pretty realistic and pretty achievable for anyone to get if you follow our best practices and you follow everything I'm going to be showing you in this video. So let's get into exactly what that looks like the nitty gritty stuff. What exactly do you have to do? So let's start from the top down and let's go over what you need to do on the landing page side. So here's an example of a landing page that we're running for one of our clients. Obviously you can see the headline, the sub headline, just simple button to register, a little scarcity bar, and then just the day and time of the class. So the biggest tips when it comes to the landing page is, like I said in the first video, at the end of the day, all you're selling is a 60 to 90 minute time block where you're educating the audience on something. Obviously, contextual to the offer. But you can position the webinar however you want, and you can do what's most congruent with your ICP. but it needs to be congruent with how you're marketing this on organic or on paid traffic. So what I'm trying to say here is that the landing page needs to be congruent with the way that you're marketing it, whether that's from organic or paid. But I want to get a little bit more into the positioning side of things. So this is like a very bland, positioning for the webinar, how to make 10K a month on Amazon. Like that's not really going to jump off the page to anyone. But right now it's August. And let's say instead of that, you position it this way. Q4 is, 60 days away. Learn how to capitalize on the biggest season of the year for Amazon sellers. So if you took this second example, for one, I bet it would convert a lot better. But two, it's a lot more interesting, and you're going to be able to kind of tie all of your pre-webinar assets, everything on the webinar, everything in the pitch. Like there's a lot of urgency and kind of interest baked into that positioning, and it's just going to make your life so much easier in terms of actually converting people that come to the webinar. So with that being said, all of the ads would need to be congruent with the angle. All of the emails before the webinar would need to be congruent with this Q4 angle. The webinar deck, you would want it to be centered around Q4 and exactly how everything changes in Q4, but how it's the easiest time for people to start getting into Amazon because, there's so many buyers and there's so much more volume, all this stuff. But then in the pitch, you could even use a little bit of urgency there where you're like, hey, Q4 is only 60 days away, 90 days away, you don't have the time to go and fall flat on your face and fail. So let's just give you the exact process that we use, and you can essentially just pitch the offer after that. But the main thing I'm getting at here is just congruency. So again, you need to actually know what you're going for. You need to know what's going to resonate with your ICP in order for all of this to be congruent. And also you want to kind of get the first step right and actually position the webinar in a way that's probable to convert and probable to stand out, especially if you're in a saturated niche. So the next thing is the pre-webinar warm-up phase. So this is everything we do to not only get the show rate up, but also get the intent of our registrants up. So from the time that someone opts in until the webinar being live is an absolutely crucial window to capitalize on to get your show rates up. And like I said, get registrants higher intent for the webinar so they're further along in the buying process. So first thing we'll do is we'll run Jeremy's Hammer Them strategy. So I just want to put some contextual stuff that we do specifically in the webinar Hammer Them strategy. We'll do testimonials that kind of build intrigue around the webinar. So we'll do testimonials where it's like, it's like a UGC ad, and it's like, hey, I went to so-and-so's free class, and, X amount of months later, these were my results. And these are real stories, real testimonials, but we're just really trying to build a lot of intrigue around what is going on the webinar. Like, what are these people learning? Why is this so effective? Why have so many people attended this? Like, this thing must be good. The next thing that we're going to do in the Hammer Them ad specifically is we're going to handle common objections and misconceptions about the opportunity, and it's going to be contextual to where they're at in the sales process. So essentially, we're just assuming that the people who sign up for the webinar have a very baseline kind of knowledge about how all of this works. So we're mainly going to be answering misconceptions and objections that come with the business model as a whole. So like, for example, let's just say we're running with the Amazon example. Okay, do I need to ship the items to my house? Does Amazon take crazy fees? Is Amazon better than drop shipping? Is Amazon something that's going to take a lot of time? As you can see, these are all kind of like top of funnel awareness questions that might prevent someone, or like that people might use to kind of disqualify themselves. That's like, oh, I was thinking about doing Amazon, but I heard that the fees were too crazy, or something like that. But we kind of want to meet people where they're at, and if they're relatively unaware still about all of these objections that come later on in the buying process, we just want to meet them where they're at by answering the objections that are probably top of mind for beginners and people that aren't as educated on the business yet, because obviously they're going to be getting the education on the webinar. The next thing we're going to do on the Hammer Them ads front is we're just going to do general awareness and authority content about the personal brand. So essentially just, whatever statistics or whatever case studies we can show that just would make the personal brand seem more credible. And essentially all we're trying to do in the entire pre-webinar process is just get people bought in on the person who's doing the webinar and actually showing up to the webinar. On the email marketing front, we're going to do 1 to 2 emails per day minimum. And it's kind of the same idea here in terms of content. We're going to do some case study stuff and testimonials that are going to kind of build intrigue around what's on the class. We're going to answer common misconceptions and just give them context as to like who the business model is for, and essentially just paint the business model in as good of a light as possible and a way that's going to make it as kind of beginner friendly and overall like as inviting for as many people that have signed up for the webinar, if that makes sense. And then, yeah, like I said, with the emails, just general awareness and just things that build the personal brand up to be looked at as more of an authority figure. So we're going to talk about all their experience, how long they've been doing it for, et cetera, et cetera. And then on the SMS front, all we're really trying to do here is keep the line of communication open, because we're going to be sending them a bunch of texts the day of the webinar. So I just don't want that day of the webinar text to be the first time they've heard from us. So essentially all we're going to do on the SMS front is we're just going to do quick little prompts. We're going to be like, hey, have you looked into something like X business before? Are you already doing this? Or is this something you're looking to get into? We can ask them simple questions like, hey, how long have you been looking to get into this for, et cetera, et cetera. We can even push them to YouTube videos just to kind of work them further down the funnel and just get them a little bit more bought in on the creator and kind of the business model in general. So guys, next, we're going to get into the exact step-by-step slideshow that's generated $15 million for us. So I was kind of debating as to like whether or not I actually want to give this away, but just kidding. You guys have to pay me for that. But I'll give you a little bit of an overview. So minute zero, essentially right when they get onto the webinar, we're just going to engage them. We're going to hit them with little prompts, kind of like I said on the SMS side, just kind of things to get the ball rolling, get them bought in, and essentially just make them feel important. Like every little micro commitment we can get from them just increases the odds that they're going to stay through the webinar and eventually convert. Minutes 1 through 15, we're essentially just going to be selling the opportunity. So the first thing we're going to do is create the golden window in their mind. So essentially, you just kind of want to open this loop as to things that we can close later and kind of give them urgency on. So let's say, for example, this is like an AI business. We're going to talk about how AI businesses are booming right now and how you're getting in so early and how this is like the generational opportunity and all these things like that. Or like the Amazon example, we're going to talk about how Q4 is only, X amount of days away, and this is the most opportunistic time for sellers. We had a bunch of people last year who started during Q4. Look at everything they did, et cetera, because this is just going to give you a little bit more leverage for the pitch, and also just makes the opportunity sound more exciting. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to educate them on the overview about how this works. So we're not going to go nitty gritty yet. That's for the training. We just want to give them like the high level view of how things work. So the next thing we're going to do is give disgusting amounts of social proof, and we're going to do this in all shapes and sizes. So what I mean by that is you don't just want to handpick your best testimonials and handpick the guys that made, billions of dollars doing this business. You want to pick people of all different ages who came from all different backgrounds, like if they came from different professions before, who are making all different amounts of money from the business, because you have to remember that for the average person, making like $30,000 a month from a business that's like intended to be a side hustle is kind of unbelievable. So we like mixing in like the smaller testimonials and the people who are younger and the people who are older, and then like a bigger testimonial and things like that. You just want to give variety, so that way people can kind of get a gauge as to like what's realistic and what's like on the high end of their expectations, what's on the low end, etc. The next thing we want to do in the beginning is just build authority. Like I said, similar to the email stuff, we just want to talk about the creator's experience, how much they've done with the business, and just kind of build them up on a pedestal, just so that way the information goes over better. Because when you build someone up as an authority and you really build up the value of the call, and you're like, hey, I would usually charge X amount for a private consulting call, and I'm essentially giving you the same information here on this training. So I really want you guys to pay attention to this, because this exact system is responsible for X amount and, take home profit for me, et cetera, et cetera. And really the whole outcome here is just getting them bought in on staying for the full webinar, because obviously if they don't stay for the full webinar, we can't pitch them and they can't buy anything. Not really, but still. So minutes 15 through 45 is mainly education focused. So unironically, you want to just flood them with value here. Like you really want to take this 30-minute window as just giving them as much tactical knowledge as they can. And really you want to create as many aha moments as possible, because these are just dopamine loops firing constantly. Like take the Amazon example again. There's people who have looked into trying Amazon for years and they just never did it. But let's say they sit down on your webinar for 60 minutes and they're finally just getting all these little aha moments where things are finally clicking. They're like, oh, like this works this way. And this is how I pick a product. And this is how the shipping flow goes. And this is how I list the product. And they feel like they're learning all this stuff. And it's honestly just dopamine loops firing constantly. But the big takeaway here is we want them to like finally realize things and have clarity for the first time. Because for a lot of these people, they had zero clarity about how the thing worked and they're showing up just because they're curious. So we really want to like dumb it down for them and make it sound as simple as possible while still giving them these aha moments. The next thing we want to do is get constant micro commitments and clarifications from them. So we constantly want to be asking things like, hey, does this make sense? Like drop a 1 in the chat if this makes sense. Okay, are you guys seeing how this works? Does this make sense to you guys? Like, doesn't this seem realistic? Things like that. Because at the end of the day, 1, we want to keep the engagement really high, and then 2, we just really want to keep them continually getting bought in, because at the end of the day, it's going to make the pitch so much easier if they're continually convincing themselves that, yes, this is possible for me. Yes, this makes sense for me. No, this is not unrealistic that I could do something like this, et cetera, et cetera. The next thing we want to keep in mind is we want to show them just enough to where they're grasping it at a fundamental level, but we're not really confusing them. Like, let's take the Amazon example again. You don't want to get into the nitty gritty of like every little nuance thing that goes into it, because at the end of the day, you just have to assume that these people are relatively unaware of how most of this stuff works, and we don't want to give them too much to the point where they're overwhelmed. So we want to give them the simplistic flow, like the simplistic process as to how all of this works. So that way they can start to kind of piece together in their brain the entire flow of everything, but they don't need to know every single detail about the business. So after the education portion, the training, we're getting to the fun part. So this is the segue into the pitch. So the framing, again, there's a million ways to do this, and I don't want to give you guys like an exact framework to follow, because then everyone is just going to copy it, even if it makes zero sense contextually to their offer. So I just want to keep it super simple. The framing is essentially, you can see the vision now, but it's still a little fuzzy. Like, you put on the glasses for the first time, but you haven't really wiped them down yet, and everything's still a little fuzzy. So you want to build slight elements of doubt by leveraging common pain points. Like, oh, you know, we've had so many people who get confused with this thing, and they can get confused with that thing, and they don't know how to do this thing. And it's like, if you're doing it on your own, what are the odds that you actually go and overcome all of these things on your own? You already have your whole rest of your life going on. Like, maybe you already have your normal job, and you have your family, and you have your kids, and all these other things. And we want to build slight elements of doubt. And then we always want to loop it back into social proof. One of the big things with live webinars is it's a very emotional experience for a lot of people. Obviously, they're not like crying on the webinar, but what I'm saying is like they kind of have these like realizations and these moments of clarity throughout the webinar. And essentially, we want to loop it back into the social proof, because we want to essentially convey the idea to these people that the majority of these people that we're showing you, the majority of these testimonials probably wouldn't have gotten to where they are right now if it wasn't for this offer that I'm about to give you. And essentially, like, obviously you want to make it a lot smoother than that, but that's a general idea. And then you kind of want to start to warm up the crossroads close. So essentially what a crossroads close is it's like, pretend that there's a fork in the road. Do you want to go and do this on your own, or do you want to do it with me and make it 10 times easier and get you to your goal 10 times faster? And then after that, it's just basically transitioning into the pitch. So then when you get to the point where you're actually pitching, obviously there's a lot of stuff that goes into here. I'm not going to do it all in this video because it would be hours long, but essentially you just want to go over the features. You want to have bonuses. Bonuses are very pivotal when it comes to actual conversion rate on a webinar. You want to essentially frame this as like the realistic way for this to come to fruition. Like, yes, of course, people have succeeded with this business model on their own, but I've coached so many people and I've seen so many people get stuck at this roadblock and this roadblock and this roadblock. So the more realistic way for this to actually become your reality within the next 90 days or whatever you're doing is by actually partnering with us and working with us together on this. Another thing that I like to bring up is just for the first time, a lot of these people are actually going to have skin in the game, like the Amazon example I keep coming back to. There's people who have been looking into how to sell on Amazon for years now, and it's like, really the reason why they never started isn't because it's too complicated. Like, at the end of the day, the information is on YouTube and Google and ChatGPT and all these places. It's because they've never had actual skin in the game and like a real reason to actually start. It's just always been one of these, oh, it would be nice kind of things. So the way that you position your offer is like, okay, we're not going to make you go through all of the legwork on your own. You're not going to have to go through all the trial and error on your own. You're essentially just going to take the express lane, and you know, in 6 months, hopefully your reality is that every day you wake up and you check your dashboard and you made $10,000 this month, or whatever you want to pitch it as. You get the idea. I'm just trying to give like a general overview. And then around the pitch is when I want to give the really in-depth and tactical social proof. So this is when I want to get into people's stories. And I want to be like, you know, Brad here was an electrician, and he hated his life, and he hated his wife, and he barely had any money. And they started doing Amazon, and this is exactly what we helped him with, and this was the product we gave him, and now look at how much money he made. Like, this is when I want to go more in-depth with the testimonials, whereas like in the beginning and throughout the education portion, I kind of just want to like mix them in. But this is where I want to almost do them as case studies. And then obviously there's plenty of other things that go into the pitch. I'm not going to give that to you guys all here. But then after the pitch, you're going to do the FAQ section, which is essentially just pre-handling objections. So go talk to your sales team, figure out the 5 to 10 most common questions, frame those as FAQs, and then you essentially just get to effortlessly pre-handle them in front of everyone. So let's say, for example, you know, are the tariffs hurting Amazon? And then the creator gets to like effortlessly handle these objections, and then the audience is just like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. Like, he answered it so effortlessly. You know what I mean? So after the FAQs, what we do on a lot of webinars is we'll have students come up and give live testimonials. This is super effective. I haven't seen a bunch of people doing this, so I was debating whether or not I should include it in here, but I guess if you guys went to one of our webinars, you would know anyways. So that is something that's very effective. And then after the live testimonials, we're going to repitch and just reiterate the offer. So again, when we're hitting people with a lengthy pitch here, at a certain point, like it kind of starts going in one ear and out of the other I feel like for a lot of people. But when we re-pitch, we're kind of just bringing it top of mind again. Like, okay, we're kind of controlling the frame of the webinar, and we're reminding them like why we're there. We're there to essentially partner with them and offer them an invitation to work with us. And then after that, you want to do the Q&A until you can't stand it anymore. Not actually, but one thing I'll say is that during the Q&A portion, you're essentially getting hundreds, if not thousands of, potential customers for you who are essentially just airing out their objections or their uncertainties right in front of you. And it's like when you have the offer owner or the personal brand answering those questions, it's a lot more effective than just having like a setter do it. So what I would say is like the Q&A is definitely really important when it comes to conversion rate. And I would just say, like, if you're the kind of guy who's just willing to do like whatever it takes to, maximize output, like sit on the Q&A for half an hour, sit on the Q&A until people stop asking stuff, because it will just only do you better the longer you stay on it and the longer you answer questions. There's really no downside to staying on it longer. So now after this, the webinar is over. Your job is completely done. Congratulations on the success. Just kidding. Job's not finished. So the post-webinar process is super crucial when it comes to just maximizing everything that comes through this funnel, especially if you're running paid traffic to it. Like, you can't really afford to leave a bunch of money on the table if you really want to maximize your profitability on the funnel. So let's go over just brief overview how the post-webinar process should go. So essentially for the no-shows, we're going to do some brief SMS follow-up. We're going to do email marketing follow-up on probably a 3 to 5 day cadence. And then we're going to be pushing them to the VSL. We're essentially going to be like, hey, I saw you missed the class. We might not be hosting another one for a while. So if you want to watch kind of the distilled version of it, here's, this free training that we put together. And then the sales team is going to follow up. One thing that people ask about a lot is replays. And honestly, I've kind of went back and forth on this. I think that when you do it properly, sending the replay out can be super effective. But if you're running webinars weekly, I would say that in certain situations, I found it's better to just kind of hype up the next webinar, because the conversion rate on the replay, for us at least from what we've seen, is significantly lower in most cases than the live webinars. So we would rather people show up to the next one live. But if you only do webinars like once a month, you might as well just send out the replay and just juice it for as much as you can. So that's the no-show process. Next thing is going to be all the people who attended but didn't book a call. We're going to do SMS follow-up for them as well. We're going to do email marketing follow-up. We're going to go a little bit harder with those people. We're going to go for 7 to 10 days. And we're going to put a heavy emphasis on the email marketing follow-up and the sales team follow-up, just because this batch of people, all the people who attended but did not book, like, this is a very warm segment of buyers. Like, all these people at this point, depending on how long they stayed for on the webinar, have spent potentially a couple hours, entertaining your offer. So they're like as close to the 1 yard line as they're going to be. So we really like to put a big focus on this pocket of people. And there's a lot of money here for sure. And then the last thing is going to be the people who attended and they already booked or bought. So essentially, we're still going to continue to nurture them. We're just going to put them into like a standard pre-call process, or depending on if they bought like a mid-ticket product, we're going to put them into an ascension process. Essentially, the nurture is going to be more so around social proof and things contextual to where they're at in the sales process. So essentially logistical questions and all the things that the sales team is constantly having to re-answer. That's what we really want to work into the nurture process here, because at this point, these people are pretty aware. Like, they've already stayed through most of the webinar. So we really just want to like kind of close those final feedback loops for them, figure out anything that we can do before the call to just make it as easy for the closer as possible, and then essentially just hand them off to the sales team. Or if they already bought, obviously we want to work them into the ascension process. So quickly, guys, I just want to talk about what this process has done for others. So like I showed in the first video, these are a handful of guys who we're running webinars for. We have ran webinars for in the past. And like I said, we've done over $15 million in cash collected with this exact framework. Like I said, I didn't go into crazy depth with everything because that's not the point of this video. It's to give you an overview so that way, you potentially want to just buy something from me. No, I'm just kidding. But seriously, I just want to give the overview in this video, and then obviously I'm happy to do more tactical stuff after this. But point being is that webinars are super effective, but they're also super messy if they're not done properly. So if you guys are interested in having us do your webinars for you, or just get hands-on help from people who have done this time and time again, I'm leaving the links down below for you to apply to work with us. But I hope you guys really loved the video. Make sure that you guys comment any questions you have so I know exactly what to make videos about after this. Make sure you like the video, subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you next time.